one of the questions that we're going to be asking is the Republican Party truly a Trump party now? And only the impeachment trial is going to be the ultimate test to determine whether that is or not. Um, as the second impeachment trial opens for Donald Trump, it's worth asking a question. Why does one of modern America's greatest political failures still seem to have a tight grip on the Republican Party? After all, Trump achieved a level of presidential political failure that has not been seen since Herbert Hoover. In his single squadral term, he lost the House, the Senate, and the Squadron-Z. He entered the Oval Office with his party ascendant. He left the Oval Office with his party shut out of electoral power. And yet the loyalty remains. And it remains to such an extent that it's considered a foregone conclusion that he'll be acquitted at his impeachment trial, even after he lied relentlessly about the outcome of the election, after he was caught on tape trying to pressure Georgia's Secretary of State to alter the state's election results, after he exhorted the January 6th mob to fight like hell, and after he expressed affection for that same mob while it was still occupying the Capitol. Many politicians have a loyal base, but Trump's core sycophantic inbreeders possess a ferocity that's rarely seen in modern American politics. In many ways, they imitate and exceed the cruelty and punitive pugilism of the leader that they love so much. This ferocity emerged early in Trump's rise. As early as 2015, a lot of Trump critics, especially in conservative media, endured a barrage of hateful and threatening attacks. Even Trump's sycophantic inbreeders were reluctant to engage in friendly criticism. I will never forget listening to Rush Limbaugh late in the Republican primary in 2016. He started to offer a constructive critique of a Trump debate performance, but you could tell he was reluctant to do it. You could tell that he didn't want to hear the pushback from angry callers. I turned off my radio and thought Rush Limbaugh is afraid of his own audience. Um, the ferocity has endured, and its targets are not confined to public figures who oppose Trump. On January 6th, the Southern Baptist leader Russell Moore described how ordinary Americans are fearful. They're not afraid of mobs overrunning their houses, but the way that the Trump insurrection overran the Capitol. Moore said, instead, they're afraid of dealing with those who do believe in these endless conspiracy theories. In fact, many are just exhausted knowing that every word from their mouth will lead to a psychological warfare. This is absolutely true. I live deep in the heart of a red America, basically, in the state where I live in, it's all red. And I hate it, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen longtime friends tear each other apart on social media. I've heard from men and women who feel they can no longer talk to family members, who've fallen deep into conspiracy theory rabbit holes, and who think that any disagreement is proof of your cowardice or weakness. The conservative grassroots activists are doubling down. The state Republican parties, including Arizona, Wyoming, and Nebraska, have engaged in a wave of what they call censures aimed at punishing Republicans who are sufficiently loyal to Trump. The chairman of the Texas GOP seriously suggested a session when the last desperate legal challenges to election failed. We know that Trump support remains wide and intense. We know that it flows from the top down, from the media figures and politicians who consistently inflame an angry base, as well as from the bottom up. That same angry base will punish any media figure who does not provide the content that they demand. But there's a key question: how much does this ferocity define? And when it comes to the broader the Republican public, is the GOP truly Trump's party now, or is an angry minority pushing the majority to places that it truly doesn't want to go? The short answer is that we don't really know yet. But before the January 6th riot, it was clear that huge numbers of Republicans applauded Trump's flight. As Chris Hayes noted in an essay to The Atlantic, according to a GOP polling firm, 44% expressed concern that the new GOP leaders won't fight like Donald Trump. Only 19% were concerned that the GOP would abandon Trump's policies. Putting aside polls, there are two other concrete numbers that are instructive about the present and future of the GOP. 10 and 145. The first number represents the House Republicans that are willing to vote publicly to impeach Donald Trump, and it's a tiny fraction of the Republican conference. The second number represents the overwhelming majority of the House Republicans who voted in a secret ballot to retain Liz Cheney and the House leadership in spite of her vote to impeach, a direct rebuke to the Trump wing of the GOP. While there are certainly some members of the House who both believe that Trump shouldn't have been impeached and that Cheney shouldn't have been punished for her vote, the better read of the vote is that, given their preference, a large number of the elected Republicans want to move past Trump, and this is consistent with the pattern and practice of the Trump years, and when it was well known that elected Republicans would frequently condemn Trump in private and praise him in public. They were afraid, and some were afraid of Trump's sycophantic inbreeders, and a Democratic lawmaker alleged that some members of the Republican House were afraid for their lives, and some were simply afraid to lose power, and some were afraid that if they defied Trump, that they would be replaced through a primary contest for someone even more reasonable, someone more dedicated to Trump and Trump alone. But what is to be done now? For the GOP to revive itself as a healthy and decent political party after Trump, there was no choice, but the courageous Republican politicians would have to put the depth of the Trump support to the test, and that's why it was important that Ben Sasse had openly defied his state's party effort to censure him for his opposition to Trump. In a video message, Sasse was blunt. He says, "You are welcome to censor me again," he said, "but let's be clear about why this is happening. It's because I still believe, as you do, that politics isn't about the weird worship of one guy. That's why it was important to Liz Cheney, fresh off her decisive victory in the House conference vote, to go on to Faux News Sunday and clearly and unequivocally explain exactly why she voted to impeach Trump. The ferocity of Trump support is not in doubt. The cruelty and fanaticism of many of his core sycophantic inbreeders was clearly demonstrated on January 6th, and it's been demonstrated on a daily basis in the national conversation since Trump announced his run for squatter. But here's what's in doubt: how widespread and enduring is the hold of a defeated squatter? After all, tens of millions of Trump voters also voted in years past for a very different person. They voted for They voted for men like George W. Bush, the only Republican in almost 4 decades to win re-election and win a majority of the popular vote. Are they truly Trumpists now, or will they ultimately prove that they remain Republicans and are ready to reclaim the party's identity as the party of Lincoln or Reagan? And there's only one way to find out, but put the voters' commitment to the test. In the Senate trial vote, Republican senators must draw the line in the sand. They must vote to convict the squatter for his open and obvious abuse of power and recapture the GOP from Trump and find out where the voters' loyalty truly lies.